Thank you, gentlemen. Chair now recognizes the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Royce, for a period of 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Director Grimm, the OFR's asset management report included a number of factual errors. For example, the report listed an incorrect name for Fidelity's highest level asset management entity and misreported the amount of its assets under management. The report improperly described Vanguard's structure. The report misrepresented the amount of assets under management for PIMCO. Now, thankfully here, the SEC provided stakeholders an opportunity in this situation to point out these mistakes, along with substantive concerns that the SEC had about the report. Do you think some of these mistakes could have been avoided if the OFR worked more closely with the financial supervisors and regulators, those, after all, with the expertise in these areas, and maybe also opened up their work for public comment?
With respect to the OFR report, so SEC staff provided, some comments to the OFR on it. It was the OFR report. They chose to take some of our comments. They chose not to take some other comments. I think ultimately it was up to OFR to decide what, how the final report looked.
Well, you may know that Congressman Patrick Murphy and we've introduced a bipartisan bill, the Office of Financial Research Accountability Act, to address these issues. And the bill requires the OFR to submit for public notice and comment an annual report that details the Office's work for the upcoming year. And additionally, this bill requires the OFR to coordinate with financial regulators when they conduct future studies. While the OFR opposes this extra, what I would call transparency, I'm hopeful we will see widespread support for these balanced changes going forward. Let me ask you another question, Director Grimm, and this follows up on the staff legal bulletin on proxy voting that Chairman Garrett and Mr. Huizenga raised earlier. Should proxy advisory firms not be held to the same sort of accountability on corporate reporting and transparency as the SEC requires of the publicly traded companies that they advise on?
So with respect to proxy advisory firms and the guidance that the staff did issue, I think it was focused on addressing two important issues as a general matter. One is with respect to the proxy advisory firms themselves, doing what we can to encourage good disclosure of material conflicts of interest by those proxy advisory firms. The second focus of the guidance was on investment advisors and how they use proxy advisory firms, making sure that their oversight of the proxy advisors is robust and appropriate.
I saw the bulletin, and one of the things that brought to mind was whether or not we shouldn't instead be having the Commission have a formal rulemaking on this. And I say it for these reasons. First, when we get to this question of what are the standards of performance, we've got a situation where you've got two entities, and they dominate here clearly over 90% of the market. And we, on top of it, have a situation where their reports, I would think, would be subject to public scrutiny after those reports are prepared. But we don't have that. So I think taking it higher than a staff legal bulletin and taking it to basically a question of rulemaking on this by the Commission, this is something I would suggest, and just sort of get your feedback on that.
Well, I think where we are right now is, after the staff issued that guidance, we have had a proxy season run, and we have my colleagues in the examination unit have been doing or are planning to do some exams, and so we're trying to gather some more feedback on the status, and then, we'll decide whether, further action, including potential rulemaking, is necessary.
Well, the rules of the road seem to change when someone has an interest. And I guarantee you, when you have a situation where you have two entities, 90% of the market, and the kinds of questions that have been called up over this performance, I think at the end of the day, we're going to need rulemaking on it. But thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony today.
Gentleman's time has expired.